Since I was young, I always saw myself as a discreet person, committed to ethics both at work and within my family relationships. I, Rick, firmly believed that my dedication on the job and my family's affection were the unshakable pillars of my life. Working for a well-established company filled me with pride and the confidence that, even in the face of adversity, I had a safe haven to return to, a home where bonds were based on support and understanding. That conviction, however, was brutally shattered in an episode that changed my perception of my own roots and strengthened my journey toward overcoming. On what seemed like an ordinary day, I unexpectedly received a message from my sister, Mandy, who, through careless disregard, leaked into our family group chat the news of my layoff. In an instant, what had always symbolized unity transformed into a stage for mocking, with laughing emojis and sneering comments hitting me like blows to the soul. The chat, once filled for years with messages celebrating holidays and memories of happy moments, suddenly became a platform for ironic remarks, bursts of laughter, and veiled jibes that fed old rivalries and wounded my self-esteem. My father, Frank, tried to ease the tension with vague words, while my mother, Linda, expressed a mix of sadness and insecurity, incapable of defending the honor I held so dear. Mandy's thoughtless act not only betrayed the confidentiality I expected from our family bonds, but also exposed a dynamic of insensitivity I never believed existed among us. Rick lost his job, folks. Looks like he might have to sell that car. He's so proud of, haha, she wrote, followed by a torrent of reactions from uncles, cousins, and even from my own father, who simply commented, "It was bound to happen." The coldness of those typed words cut deeper than any official termination ever could. My sister always had this uncanny ability to turn my vulnerabilities into a spectacle. Ever since childhood, when we vied for our parents' attention, she found subtle ways to diminish my achievements. When I won my first medal at the school swimming championship, Mandy made sure to point out that I only won because the best swimmer was under the weather. When I got into college, she insinuated that my acceptance was only because the major wasn't very competitive. And now, at the most delicate moment of my professional career, there she was, exposing my vulnerability as if it were just another family joke. The impact of her revelation extended well beyond our virtual space, seeping into subsequent family gatherings. At every meeting, I was forced to relive that painful moment, while offhand comments and disapproving looks constantly reminded me of the humiliation I had suffered. I felt that the environment I once believed to be a safe refuge had become a space where my pain was inadvertently celebrated at the expense of my dignity. At a Sunday lunch just 3 days after the incident in our group chat, Uncle Charlie asked in a falsely concerned tone, "So kiddo, how's the job hunt going? Have you thought about driving for Lyft in the meantime?" I swallowed hard, tasting the bitterness of shame mixed with the bland food on my plate. My cousin Julie, ever so close to Mandy, added, "There are openings at the mall store where I work, if you need something less upscale." Her derisive smile left no doubt about the hidden intent behind her so-called offer of help. During that endless lunch, I maintained a calm facade, a technique I had perfected over years of dealing with my toxic family dynamics. Inside, however, a storm of contradictory emotions was raging within me. It was a blend of shame, anger, disappointment, and surprisingly, a growing determination beginning to take shape. Something was changing inside me. That night, lying in bed, I replayed every moment of that family lunch, every condescending glance, every comment disguised as concern. Insomnia had become my constant companion since the layoff, but that night, instead of wallowing in self-pity, I began to analyze the situation with cold detachment. The layoff, which initially seemed like a personal catastrophe, started to assume a different contour in my mind. I had worked for that company for 7 years, always dedicated, often sacrificing weekends and personal relationships in the name of urgent projects. I received promotions and recognition, but I also accumulated a stress that was beginning to compromise my physical and mental health. Perhaps, on some unconscious level, I had already known that that cycle needed to be broken. As for family, the pain ran deeper. Since childhood, I sought approval through achievements, good grades, sports awards, getting into a prestigious college, and landing a respected job. All that effort to prove my worth, to earn a position of respect that should have come naturally rather than as a hard-fought prize. And yet, It took just one moment of vulnerability for that illusion of family support to dissipate like smoke. Amid this emotional whirlwind, I decided to act with both caution and determination. I started compiling all the records, screenshots, and testimonies that proved what had happened, turning each piece of evidence into a tool for personal empowerment. During sleepless nights, I oscillated between the desire to retaliate against the insult and the conviction that my true revenge lay in rebuilding my identity and reclaiming control of my own narrative. You want to laugh at my layoff? Go ahead, but you'll laugh while watching me rise again, I thought, as I saved each message from that family chat that had now revealed its true colors. The next day marked the beginning of my transformation. I awoke before my alarm, took a long, refreshing shower, and put on my best outfit as if I were heading to an important interview. And in a way, I was. The most important interview was with myself, a reconnection with the Rick who, at some point on this journey, had lost himself trying to please people who would never be genuinely happy about his success. I revamped my resume, updated my profile on professional platforms, and began mapping out companies that aligned better with my values and genuine aspirations, ones not dictated by family expectations. I realized that for years, I had pursued a career that impressed others much more than it fulfilled me. That evening, I received a message from Mandy. "Hey, bro, any news on the job hunt?" The forced familiarity and false concern oozed hypocrisy in every word. Instead of responding impulsively, as the old Rick might have, I took a deep breath and replied with calculated calm. "Thanks for asking, Mandy. I'm taking this time to reevaluate my professional priorities. By the way, I almost forgot to thank you for the favor of sharing my situation with the family. Thanks to you, I now clearly see who really cares about me." The read receipt popped up immediately, but her reply took nearly an hour. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just mentioned it because I thought everyone should know so they could help." I smiled at the screen. It was exactly the response I had expected. No admission of fault, no genuine apology, just the same old manipulation, dressed up as brotherly concern. "Of course, Mandy." Papa's laugh after your announcement clearly showed an intent to help, just like the comments about me selling my car. "Thanks a lot for that family assistance." I locked my phone without waiting for a reply. That small exchange of messages, seemingly trivial, symbolized a significant break with my old patterns. The old Rick would have swallowed his anger, accepted a half-hearted apology, and kept trying to be accepted. The new Rick, rising from the ashes of humiliation, was no longer willing to maintain appearances at the expense of his inner peace. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself completely in restructuring my professional life. I took online courses I had always wanted to pursue but never had time for. I attended networking events without the burden of trying to impress, just with a genuine interest in meeting new people and discovering opportunities. I rediscovered old talents and passions that I had abandoned in pursuit of corporate success. Surprisingly, the layoff that had elicited so many laughs in our family chat turned out to be the turning point I needed. At the same time, I began to set clear boundaries within family relationships. I stopped attending our weekly Sunday dinners, gatherings that had become toxic after the incident. When asked about my absence, I responded politely yet firmly, "I'm focusing on environments that positively contribute to my mental health right now." My mother, concerned about my distance, visited me one late afternoon. Sitting on the balcony of my apartment, clutching steaming coffee cups, she finally broached the subject. "Son, your sister didn't mean any harm. You know Mandy, she's always been impulsive. She never thinks before she speaks." "Mom," I interrupted softly, "with all due respect, that's exactly the problem. Mandy is 32, not 12. Impulsiveness is no excuse for exposing someone in a vulnerable moment. And the issue isn't just her, it's everyone who thought it acceptable to laugh at my situation. No one was laughing at you, Rick. It was just a way to lighten the mood, to not let things get too heavy. Lightening the mood at the expense of my layoff? That's an interesting concept of humor, wouldn't you say?" My voice came out colder than I had intended, though I could no longer mask my disappointment. "Mom, I've always respected you and Dad. I've always tried to be the son you expected, studying at the best schools, getting into the college you chose for me, following the career path you approved. And yet, it took one moment of vulnerability for me to become nothing more than a punchline in the family. I saw tears welling in her eyes, a mix of sadness and guilt that, for a moment, nearly made me back down. But I continued. I'm not severing ties with anyone. I'm simply learning at last to put myself first, to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than expectations and appearances. That painful conversation was necessary. For the first time, I openly expressed my feelings without fear of disappointing anyone, without the constant need for approval that had defined my family interactions. It was as if a great weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I then decided to confront the situation directly and honestly at a crucial family meeting. I asked Dad to organize a dinner at home with everyone involved in the chat incident. To my surprise, he agreed without question, perhaps sensing the seriousness of my request. On that fateful night, seated around the dining table where I'd grown up, I looked each familiar face in the eye with a serenity I never knew I possessed. In clear and firm terms, I expressed that mutual respect is the foundation of any relationship, and that exposing someone's vulnerabilities for the sake of ridicule was unacceptable. I insisted that a true family is meant to be a space for support and growth, not a tool for spreading humiliation. I'm not here to point fingers or to assign blame, I said, keeping my tone calm even as my heart raced. I'm here to set clear boundaries about how I expect to be treated from now on. Mandy, visibly uncomfortable, attempted to downplay things again. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Rick. It was just a joke that says a lot about our family dynamic, doesn't it? About how you all view my struggles and difficulties? I replied without raising my voice. You know, Mandy, I spent my life trying to be the perfect brother, the exemplary son, the impeccable professional. And yet, at the moment when I needed support the most, all I received were laughs. Uncle Charlie, ever so quick with jokes at my expense, suddenly fell silent, fiddling with the tablecloth. Dad, Frank, nervously toyed with the salt shaker, avoiding eye contact. Only Mom and Grandpa Pete looked directly at me, their expressions a mix of pride and regret. I'm not here seeking apologies or empty promises, I continued. I'm here to inform you that from this day forward, I am consciously choosing the energies I allow in my life. I choose relationships that lift me up, not ones that diminish me, and I invite each of you to reflect on the kind of relationship you wish to maintain with me moving forward. Despite tensions and resistance from some, that conversation marked a turning point in my life, a symbol of the beginning of a journey of self-discovery and liberation. I left that dinner with my back straight, and the certainty that, regardless of the reactions that might follow, I had honored myself by establishing healthy boundaries. After that devastating episode, I immersed myself in deep reflections about loyalty and identity. I realized that Mandy's betrayal wasn't just an isolated act of mockery. It was the result of years of accumulated rivalries and resentments. Every nasty word and every burst of laughter exposed the fragility of bonds that were supposed to protect me. I remembered an incident from our childhood when I won a school essay contest. Mandy, 2 years older than me, tore up my certificate while I was asleep. When I woke up and discovered it, I ran to my parents in tears. Dad just said, "Don't be such a crybaby, Rick. Your sister is only teaching you to be strong." That seemingly insignificant phrase planted in me the seed of the belief that my pain wasn't meant to be validated, that showing vulnerability was a sign of weakness. I grew up believing I had to be perfect to be loved. Every academic achievement, every promotion at work, every material possession was, deep down, a desperate attempt to prove my worth. The layoff, followed by the public exposure of my vulnerability, dismantled that carefully constructed facade. And paradoxically, it was exactly what I needed to start rebuilding my identity on more authentic foundations. Determined to transform that pain into learning, I began establishing new boundaries and recognizing that respect for myself was more important than the approval of others. I started practicing small acts of self-care every day, morning meditations, evening walks at sunset, reading books I had postponed due to lack of time. I restructured my finances, creating a safety net that would allow me to make professional choices based on purpose rather than necessity. The job search process, which initially filled me with anxiety and insecurity, transformed into a journey of self-discovery.
In each interview, instead of molding myself to recruiters' expectations, I presented myself authentically. I spoke openly about my strengths, but also about areas I needed to improve, about my values, and about the kind of work culture in which I could truly
thrive. In one of these interviews, for a tech startup focused on social impact, the CEO asked why I had left my previous job. Instead of offering the sanitized, politically correct answer I might have given months earlier, I opted for honesty. I was laid off during a restructuring. At first, I saw it as a personal failure, but today I view it as a necessary redirection. I realized I was on a professional path that didn't fulfill me, prioritizing status and outside approval over my well-being and purpose. To my surprise, that raw honesty was met with respect and understanding. The CEO shared his own story of a career redirection following a severe burnout, and we ended up talking for nearly 2 hours, far beyond the scheduled interview time. I left with the feeling that, regardless of the outcome, I had presented the real me. Imperfect, always. Evolving, but authentic. A week later, I received a job offer. The salary was slightly lower than what I'd earned at my previous position, but the benefits included flexible hours, the possibility of partial remote work, and most importantly, an organizational culture that valued work-life balance. I accepted, without hesitation, certain that this new phase represented much more than a simple job. It was a realignment with my newly discovered values. On the night I signed the contract, I received an unexpected message from my grandfather, Pete, the family patriarch who rarely spoke up in our group chats or family discussions. "Rick, I heard about your new job. I'm proud to see the man you've become. True strength isn't about never falling, but about rising every time you do, wiser and more determined. I'll always be here for you." Those simple words, from the man whose respect I cherished above all, brought tears to my eyes. Not all family bonds were toxic. Some only needed to be rediscovered and strengthened through mutual authenticity. As the days passed, I learned that true self-love comes from having the courage to set boundaries and not allow excessive behavior to define who we are. I faced moments of loneliness and doubt, but I discovered within me the strength to rise again and rethink my interpersonal relationships. At my new job, I found an environment that valued my contributions without demanding excessive personal sacrifices. I forged new friendships based on genuine affinities and mutual respect, not on social obligations or family expectations. I rekindled old hobbies and discovered new interests, allowing me to explore facets of my personality that had been dormant for years. At family gatherings that I now attended by choice rather than obligation, I asserted my presence with a newfound confidence. No longer the Rick desperate for approval, I had become a man secure in his own worth, a man capable of loving without emotional dependency and setting boundaries without guilt. Mandy, initially resistant to my transformation, began to show subtle signs of change. At one of Dad's birthday dinners, she approached me when we were alone on the back porch. "I've been noticing a change in you, Rick. You seem different, lighter, more yourself." "Life is full of ironies," I replied without hostility. "Sometimes, you have to lose something important to discover what truly matters." I realize I never truly apologized for what happened in the group chat. It was insensitive of me. I looked at my sister, and for the first time in a long while saw beyond our rivalry and accumulated wounds. I saw a woman who, like me, carried her own insecurities and defense mechanisms formed during our shared childhood. "You know, Mandy, that incident hurt a lot back then. But today, looking back, I realize it was a necessary catalyst. It forced me to confront the dysfunctional patterns I maintained out of fear of disappointing or not being enough. You've always been enough, Rick. Maybe that was the problem. I grew up in your shadow, always trying to grab attention by, if anything, I had to take you down." That unexpectedly honest conversation paved the way for gradual reconciliation. Not a return to what we once were, but the beginning of something new, founded on a more mature and compassionate understanding of our differences and similarities. 6 months after the layoff that sparked all this transformation, I received an invitation to share my experience at an event on professional resilience. I hesitated at first. Publicly discussing vulnerabilities was still challenging, but I accepted, recognizing the opportunity to turn my personal story into something that could help others facing their own battles. On stage, in front of an audience of professionals, I shared not only the story of my layoff and subsequent family humiliation, but, more importantly, the inner journey that followed. I spoke about the importance of recognizing toxic patterns, setting healthy boundaries, and redefining success on personal, not external terms. The greatest lesson I learned, I concluded, is that our true strength doesn't come from never falling, but from our ability to turn each fall into a new beginning. And the relationships that truly matter, whether family, professional, or social, are the ones that allow us to be authentically who we are, with all our achievements and vulnerabilities. The audience's response was overwhelming. After the talk, many people approached me to share their own stories of overcoming forced redirections that turned out to be disguised blessings. I realized that by embracing my vulnerability, I had created a safe space for others to do the same. Today, when I look back, I see that the humiliation I endured became the catalyst that propelled me toward a life anchored in integrity and authenticity, a redefinition of what it means to belong and to love truly. The layoff, which once seemed like a tragedy, was the beginning of a reconnection with myself, with my core values, and with my true aspirations. In my new professional role, I have the opportunity to lead projects that align with causes I genuinely care about. I've built mentoring relationships with young professionals, sharing not only technical knowledge, but also the lessons on balance, authenticity, and resilience that I learned along the way. In my family relationships, I found a new equilibrium, not complete separation, nor submission to toxic dynamics, but a conscious engagement based on clear boundaries and realistic expectations. I reconciled with Mandy, not erasing the past, but creating a new present, built on mutual understanding and respect for our differences. As for the family group chat, I still participate, but now with a fresh perspective, no longer anxious for validation or fearful of judgment. I am present by choice, aware of my emotional boundaries, and ready to engage or step back as needed to preserve my inner peace. Life, I came to understand, is not a straight upward line of unbroken success, as I once naively believed. It is a series of cycles, a spiral of falls and fresh starts, of losses paving the way for new gains. True evolution isn't about avoiding the falls, but about extracting the lessons that transform us from each descent. Thus, even though blood ties have sometimes proven fragile, I now know that true family is built on respect, empathy, and unconditional support, and that by turning pain into fuel for growth, I reclaim the freedom to be exactly who I am. The layoff that once elicited laughter in our family chat now symbolizes the starting point of my reinvention. I hold no grudges or resentments, only gratitude for the awakening that painful moment provided. I am thankful for the relationships that survived and were strengthened through adversity, and for those that drifted away, making room for new connections that align more closely with who I have become. In the end, the humiliation I suffered did not define my destiny. It merely redirected my path toward a more authentic route, one more in tune with my essence. And on this continuous journey of self-discovery and growth, I carry the certainty that I am so much more than my falls or my achievements. I am the resilience I display in the face of obstacles, the compassion I extend to others and myself, the courage to live in line with my deepest values, regardless of external expectations. This is my story of transformation, not only professional, but deeply human. A story that continues to be written with each new day, with each choice, and with every fresh start. A story that constantly reminds me that sometimes our greatest growth stems directly from our most vulnerable moments, and that there is extraordinary power in embracing our authenticity, even, and perhaps especially, when it exposes us to risks and judgment. Life carries on, unpredictable and challenging. Last quarter, I received an offer to lead an international project at the company, a chance that, ironically, emerged from the network I built after that resilience talk. The old Rick would have immediately announced it in the family chat, desperate for validation and recognition. The new Rick chose to celebrate the achievement first with himself, processing the personal meaning of that advancement before sharing it with others. When I finally mentioned the news at a family lunch, I did so without fanfare or expectation. My father, always sparing with his praise, surprised me with a warm, tight hug and words I will never forget. "I'm proud of you, son, not for the title, but for the man you've become." That sincere moment meant more to me than 1,000 claps in any group chat. Mandy, in a demonstration of personal growth that moved me deeply, raised her glass in a spontaneous toast. To my brother, who taught us that sometimes falling is the start of the highest flight. Our eyes met in a silent understanding that transcended Words. We had both evolved through our challenges, learning to build an adult relationship based on mutual respect rather than childish competition. The journey of family healing continues, with its natural progress and setbacks. There are moments when old patterns resurface, when seemingly innocent comments carry the shadow of past dynamics. In those moments, I take a deep breath and rely on the tools I've developed: assertive communication, clear boundaries, and compassion for myself and others. I no longer chase perfection in relationships, only authenticity and mutual respect. Professionally, the new international project has brought stimulating challenges and the opportunity to lead teams across different countries. Ironically, the vulnerability I experienced with my layoff has made me a more empathetic and effective leader. I understand that behind every metric, every deadline, and every deliverable, there are human beings with their own struggles, insecurities, and aspirations. This awareness doesn't make me any less demanding about quality, but it certainly makes me more mindful of the impact my words and decisions have on my team's well-being. During a recent global video conference, one analyst made a mistake that significantly affected our quarterly results. Before I could intervene, I saw other team members bracing for what they likely expected to be a harsh reprimand. Instead, I calmly asked, "What can we learn from this? How can we implement safeguards to prevent a similar situation in the future?" The relief was palpable, even through screens spanning 3 continents. After the meeting, I received a private message from that analyst. "Thank you for turning a crisis into an opportunity for collective learning. Your leadership inspires me to be better every day." Those simple words touched me deeply. I realized that the personal transformation I underwent was creating positive ripples far beyond my own experience. The pain I faced when shared with vulnerability and authenticity became a bridge for more meaningful connections, both professionally and personally. In my romantic relationships, I too experienced significant change. For years, my romantic involvements followed a predictable pattern. I attracted partners who, in some way, reproduced that conditional approval dynamic I had grown up with. Relationships in which I constantly had to prove my worth, where my professional success was valued more than my true self. After a period of self-reflection and learning, I allowed myself to open up to a different kind of connection. I met Camilla at a meditation retreat, something the old Rick would never have considered a worthwhile way to spend his time. Our connection was immediate and profound, based on shared values and a mutual admiration that went far beyond external achievements. On our third date, I shared with her the story of my layoff and the ensuing family humiliation. I did so without theatrics or self-pity, simply as a key part of my journey. Her response revealed the kind of person she was. "Thank you for trusting me with your story. I admire your courage in transforming such a painful experience into personal growth." Our relationship developed naturally and organically, free from the pressures and expectations I once imposed on myself. For the first time, I felt loved for who I am, not for what I achieve or represent. It was simultaneously liberating and challenging. Liberating because I no longer had to maintain a facade of perfection, and challenging because it required a kind of vulnerability I wasn't accustomed to. Camilla was gradually introduced to my family, in small, carefully managed doses. I observed with interest how she interacted with each family member, especially with Mandy. To my surprise, the two developed a friendly, respectful rapport, devoid of competition or power games. Perhaps because Camilla wasn't burdened by our family history, she was able to see my sister in a new, compassionate light, unclouded by old expectations. One peaceful afternoon, as we walked through a park near my apartment, Camilla remarked, "Your family is interesting. I can see both the dynamics you described and the potential for healthier relationships. There's so much love there, even if it's sometimes expressed in confusing ways." Her observation made me reflect on how our perceptions of family are often limited by the lenses of our own wounds. Through Camilla's eyes, I glimpsed new possibilities for relationships that, despite their challenges, remained an important part of my story. On the first anniversary of my layoff, a date I deliberately chose to recognize as a milestone of transformation, I organized an intimate dinner at my home. I invited only those who had been pivotal in my journey of rebuilding. Grandpa Pete, whose wise words anchored me in my darkest moments. My friend Charles, who listened without judgment whenever I needed to vent. My therapist, Anna, who joined, as a witness to my evolution, rather than as just a professional. Camilla, who symbolized the future I was creating, and to everyone's surprise, including my own, Mandy. With everyone gathered in my living room, I raised my glass for a toast. Exactly 1 year ago, I experienced what I then considered the worst day of my professional life. I was laid off from a job that defined a large part of my identity, and as if the pain wasn't enough, my vulnerability was exposed and laughed at in the very environment that should have been my safe haven, my family. I paused, taking in the attentive faces around me. Mandy looked uncomfortable, yet she met my gaze with a quiet courage that I came to respect. Today, 1 year later, I gather you not to mourn that loss, but to celebrate everything I gained from it. I gained self-awareness, authenticity, and the courage to set healthy boundaries. I gained the ability to define success on my own terms, rather than by external expectations. I've forged deeper, more meaningful relationships founded not on perfection and approval, but on vulnerability and acceptance. I looked directly at my sister. Mandy, your presence here means a lot to me. Our history is complex, with difficult chapters that cannot simply be erased. But I'm truly grateful for the opportunity for us to write new chapters together. Chapters grounded in mutual understanding and respect for our differences. To my surprise, Mandy had prepared her own words. I always saw you as the perfect brother Rick, the son who got everything right while I stumbled at every turn. Exposing your layoff in the group chat was my distorted way of finally feeling superior, of leveling the playing field. It was petty and cruel, and I deeply regret it. She paused, visibly moved. What I didn't realize at the time was that, by trying to bring you down, I only revealed my own smallness. Your response to everything that happened, the dignity, the courage, the ability to rebuild without bitterness, taught me more about true strength than any professional success ever could. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved to be cast aside. That raw moment of honesty and shared vulnerability enveloped the room in a reverent silence. It wasn't an awkward quiet, but a sacred space in which old wounds could finally breathe and begin to heal. Grandpa Pete, with the wisdom of his 85 years, broke the silence. Did you know that in Japan there's a practice called kintsugi? When a piece of pottery breaks, rather than discarding it or hiding the cracks, they repair it with gold. The end result is a piece even more beautiful and valuable, where the fractures become part of its history and beauty. He looked at both Mandy and me with a serene smile. You two, over this past year, have been practicing your own form of kintsugi. The cracks are still visible, of course, but they're being filled with something precious: understanding, forgiveness, and shared growth. I'm proud to witness this reconstruction. That night remains etched in my memory as a turning point, not only in my personal journey, but in the transformation possible within family relationships, when there is genuine willingness to grow through pain. Today, nearly 2 years after the layoff that sparked this profound personal metamorphosis, I look back with a serene gratitude for the path I've traveled. Professionally, I'm in a place that resonates much more with my true values and talents. Emotionally, I've developed a resilience not derived from rigidity, but from the flexibility to bend without breaking when life's inevitable storms hit. My relationship with Camilla has evolved into a solid commitment, built on mutual respect and shared growth. We plan to move in together next year, uniting our lives with clear awareness of the challenges and beauties of building an authentic relationship. With my family, I have found a healthier closeness, neither complete estrangement nor reactive submission, but a conscious engagement founded on clear boundaries and realistic expectations. I participate in family gatherings by choice, not out of obligation. I maintain those boundaries when needed, without guilt or elaborate explanations. I nurture a new form of familial love that doesn't demand perfection, only genuine presence and mutual respect. Mandy and I continue our journey of reconciliation, with the natural ups and downs that come with any healing process. We've even discovered shared interests we'd never explored before: a mutual passion for photography, a fascination with personal transformation stories, and a newfound appreciation for wine that has even sparked plans for a joint trip to some of America's renowned wine regions next year. My father, who has always expressed his love through actions rather than words, shows his renewed affection through small gestures: a casual text asking about my day, an invitation to watch a football game together, a quiet consultation on decisions he once made on his own. These modest steps are significant for a man of his generation and temperament. My mother has found an unexpected ally in Camilla, someone who helps her communicate with me in more direct and healthy ways. It's as though Camilla has become a safe bridge between emotional worlds that for years failed to connect effectively. As for me, I continue my daily practice of self-awareness and self-care. I've learned that vulnerability is not weakness, but the purest expression of human courage. That setting boundaries isn't selfish, but an act of love, both for oneself and for others. I've come to understand that true success isn't measured by external achievements or the approval of others, but by the ability to live in alignment with our most profound values, even if that means swimming against the tide of social and familial expectations. Life, with its inevitable falls and fresh starts, continues to remind me that we are far more resilient than we imagine. Our most painful wounds, when faced with courage and awareness, can transform into sources of wisdom and compassion. Truly nourishing relationships are not those free of conflict, but those that provide a safe space for authentic expression, for repairing ruptures, and for growing together. Today, I look at the man in the mirror with new respect and understanding. No longer just the perfect professional, the exemplary son, or the compliant brother. I am simply Rick, with all my strengths and weaknesses, my successes and failures, my beautifully imperfect humanity. And in that recognition, I find a freedom that no title, external validation, or family approval could ever provide. The freedom to be truly, completely, and authentically myself.